So today we are reacting to his story, and right now his YouTube channel is blowing up because people be saying like he's like a next version of Zach D. Film. So I want to try and watch his story. So let's go. Alright, I'm kind of scared.
I grabbed the last bag of BBQ chips off the shelf, but two kids snatched it from my hands and held it high over their heads. I was 4'2" and officially a midget, so when I jumped for it, I barely reached their shoulders. They pulled out their phones. "Go on, little man, jump," and hysterically laughed. My face burned with shame, but I kept jumping because these chips were discontinued. I had driven to 13 stores for this last bag, and nothing was stopping me from getting them. They waved it over my head for the 10th time, but then a hand came from the sky. A 7-foot man was holding the chips up over punks' heads, his phone out. "Go on, jump for it." They jumped but couldn't even reach his chest and stormed off embarrassed. I smiled up at him, but he was already looking at the label. Barbecue, my favorite. He opened the bag right there and literally stepped over me to keep walking. I swung as hard as I could and missed by so much I almost spun out of the box. It was the bottom of the 9th. We had a runner on 3rd, 2 outs, down by 1. The ump dropped into his squat behind me. "Just put the ball in play, kid." I looked up at my dad in the bleachers and winked. "I'm hitting this one over, Dad." He cupped his hands around his mouth. "Send it, bud." The next pitch came in slow and right down the middle. I swung as hard as I'd ever swung in my life, and the ball cleared the fence by 10 feet. I dropped the bat and started running. Rounding first, I looked up at the bleachers to find my dad. He wasn't standing up. He was supposed to be standing up. He was the loudest one in the bleachers, and now he was just sitting with his hand on his chest. My mom was right next to him watching me through her phone, screaming, "Run, run, run." Second base. Dad still wasn't moving. By 3rd, I was barely running. He fell forward over the bleacher rail, and I stopped halfway between 3rd and home. "Dad!" I dropped the helmet and started running off the field toward my dad. The ump had my dad on the ground, pumping his chest with both hands. I fell to my knees and grabbed my dad's hand. My mom was on the phone with 911 screaming our address. 5 minutes later, the ambulance pulled up and the paramedics got him on a gurney. As they were loading him in, his eyes opened and found mine. I saw it, bud. His grip tightened on my hand. I've never been prouder. Then they slid him in and the doors closed. I hit the only home run of my life, and my dad lived to see it. He keeps the ball on his nightstand. I was sitting in class when a Smurf walked in. It was my professor, painted head to toe blue with a white hat and everything. Half the class started laughing. He didn't react at all. He just set his bag down and started teaching like nothing was different. The girl next to me leaned over and whispered, "It's Smurf Day." I asked her what that meant. She just looked at me and said, "You'll see." After class, I grabbed one of the older students and asked him what was going on. He sat me down on a bench outside and told me the whole story. A few years back, the professor had a 3-year-old daughter. She was diagnosed with a rare brain disease and spent most of her life in a hospital bed. The Smurfs was her favorite show. Every night after his last class, he'd drive straight to the hospital and sit in the chair next to her bed and watch it with her. She'd rest her head on his arm, and they'd watch every episode together until she fell asleep. He was a single dad. He couldn't stop teaching because that's how he paid for her treatment. So every morning, he'd leave her in that hospital room and walk into a classroom and pretend he was fine. He'd come in with red eyes, and nobody said a word. Eventually, some of his students found out what was happening and put together enough money for him to take time off. He got to spend her last few weeks with her because of them. She passed away 3 days after his last class. Every year on her birthday, he walks into class painted blue from head to toe. He never explains it. He never talks about it. He just teaches the whole lecture looking like a Smurf because it was the last thing that made her smile. I was 12 and starving when I threw a chain over the electric fence around Mr. Hatch's apple tree. Sparks shot up everywhere and the wires went dead. My little sister was watching from under the bridge with Tommy and 4 others, gripping the moldy loaf we'd been splitting for 3 days. Mr. Hatch's porch looked down on that bridge. All week he'd been on it biting into apples and yelling at us. "These apples are the sweetest in town, rats. You'll never know." Tonight I was going to know. I climbed over and tiptoed across wet grass toward the tree. A stick snapped under my foot loud enough to wake a graveyard. I froze, but the house stayed dark. 3 steps later, motion lights flooded the whole yard. A door slammed open, and Mr. Hatch came charging out in his bathrobe. "Get your hands off my apples, you little rat!" I sprinted to the tree, jumped onto the lowest branch, and climbed as fast as I could. He came barreling across the grass with his head craned up at me, and caught his foot on the chain I'd thrown across the wires. He flew shoulder first into the trunk so hard the whole tree shook. An apple the size of my fist dropped straight down and clocked him on the forehead. He went face down in the grass and didn't move. I whistled twice from up in the branches, branches. Tommy was first over the fence with the rest piling in behind him. They stood under the tree with shirts held open while I dropped apples down until every shirt was full. Mr. Hatch woke up to bare branches. Under the bridge that night, my little sister got the biggest one, and we ate until our stomachs hurt. Turns out he was right about one thing. They really were the sweetest in town. My principal tried to shut down my silly band's business 4 times before he gave up. At recess on Monday, a first grader handed me $1, and I peeled the glow-in-the-dark unicorn off my wrist and dropped it on his. Behind him, a dozen more kids were waiting their turn, all holding quarters. A second grader tried to trade me a half-eaten Reese's, and I told him cash only. By Friday, I had more cash than my babysitter made in a week, and Mr. Doyle was watching me from across the playground with his arms crossed. The next day, I was in math class when I heard Mr. Doyle on the intercom. "Effective immediately. No silly bands are permitted in the classroom." I rolled my stack into my pencil case before he finished talking. At recess, I sold from the bathroom line while he prowled the playground checking wrists. The next day, he was back on the intercom. "No silly bands are permitted anywhere on school property." After the bell, I set up shop on the sidewalk 6 inches past the school gate. Kids poured out and lined up while Mr. Doyle rushed to the property line, gripping the fence as every dollar went into my pocket. A couple days passed, and I was sitting on the couch when my mom answered the phone, and I heard Mr. Doyle's voice. "Your son is running an unsanctioned business outside our school, and I need you to put a stop to it." She covered the phone and turned to me. "How much have you made?" I held up the wad and told her $92. She got back on the phone and said, "Sounds like he's learning," and hung up. Then that Friday, Mr. Doyle stood at the gate watching me set up the line. He didn't say anything, didn't take notes. He just shook his head, turned around, and walked back inside. The next morning, he stopped me in the hallway. I tightened my grip on my arm because I figured he was finally taking my stash. He pulled a wrinkled dollar bill out of his pocket. "My daughter wants the glow-in-the-dark mermaid." I slid it off my wrist and put it in his palm. "Cash only." Eric opened my snack cabinet and groaned, "There's no snacks in here." I stared at the Pringles, the ice cream, the Doritos, and chocolate candies. "What do you mean there's no snacks?" Eric looked at me with red eyes and a goofy smile. "I'm on the munchies, bro. I want Cheetos. The only open store is a 90-minute walk. Just eat the Doritos." Eric slammed the cabinet closed. "I want Cheetos, dude." I groaned and put on my jacket. We stepped outside and Eric rubbed his hands. "The walk will go quickly, dude. Trust me." But 5 minutes and heavy rain started pouring. My hair got wet and my pants immediately became drenched. "Eric, let's turn back. You don't even have a jacket." But Eric smiled and put his arm around me. "The longer the path, the louder the crunch, bro." I gave in and continued, my shoes squelching with every step. But then we reached the most dangerous street in the city. Maps showed this was the only way. And when I looked back, I saw a sketchy man in a hood behind us. I felt my heartbeat in my throat and instantly tapped Eric's shoulder. "Let's go home. Someone's following us." But Eric just kept walking, smiling to himself and thinking about the Cheetos. I turned around and saw the man closer now. I caught a glimpse of the knife in his pocket and the paranoia kicked in. "Eric, dude, he's behind us. He's got a knife. We have to go, man. We have to go." Eric simply turned around and stared right at him. "Him? Nah, he's just vibing. Just focus on the Cheetos, bro." He turned back around and I began leading us down the weirdest turns and alleys until we finally lost him. I asked Eric to just call an Uber home the whole way, but he kept assuring me the Cheetos would be worth it. We finally reached the store and stepped inside, wet and soaking, my hands shaking because we'd nearly been killed. Eric walked to the Cheetos and picked them up. He looked at them closely, then shook his head. "Actually, man, I don't really want these." He put them back, and I flailed my arms in anger and disbelief. Eric grabbed my shoulder. "Bro, they were $2. I'm not paying $2. I can just eat the Doritos back at your place." My friend Darren laced up his new Jordans and pumped his fist in the air. "Now I can jump like Jordan." I held back my laugh. "No disrespect, Darren, but you're 350 pounds. You can't jump like Jordan." But he looked past me, and his eyes settled on the rim like he was ready to soar. "If I hang on that rim, you owe me $100. I instantly shook his hand, ready to collect the easiest money of my life. Darren walked under the rim and rubbed his new shoes. Just like MJ, baby. He squatted down and jumped as high as he could. His arms stretched through the air, and he almost touched the net. His face deflated, and he looked at his new shoes like they'd betrayed him. "Told you, dude. Now give me my $100. I walked over, but Darren walked past me. "I'm going to touch that rim." He dragged a chair from one side of the gym to under the hoop. Then he stacked another. He stacked 4 chairs until they reached the rim, then put his foot on the first one. "Darren, are you seriously? I want to be like MJ," he interrupted. The chairs creaked and a leg splintered as he climbed, and I looked away because I couldn't watch him fall. But he reached the top and grabbed the rim with both hands. "Told you I could jump like Jordan." He hung on the rim, but then the mount of the rim cracked. I froze, and Darren's face dropped as we heard another crack. I'm getting down, but right as he put his foot on the chair, a spiderweb crack shot across the glass. The whole backboard exploded, and Darren fell backwards, clutching the snapped rim. He bounced off the chair pile and dropped to the floor. I ran over. "Oh my God, Darren, are you okay?" He smiled with his front tooth missing. "I don't think I can jump like Jordan, but at least I can break backboards like Shaquille O'Neal. He reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet while still on the floor. What? I touched the rim, didn't I? My dad came home beaming, saying he'd just met a guy in a black coat and a top hat who showed him how to hypnotize himself. He immediately turned the TV to a dead channel and sat 2 feet from the static, reading the instructions. Watch static for 30 minutes. Cover your eyes and listen to the static for another 30 minutes. When the hour is up, you'll be hypnotized for 4 hours. My dad raised his finger and said, he told me anything I see during those 4 hours isn't real. I rolled my eyes and went to my room as he started watching the static. But then, an hour passed, and I heard the front door open. I froze, because the man in a black coat and top hat was standing in the middle of our living room, holding an empty duffel bag. He started shoving our jewelry inside it, while Dad sat on the couch, staring at him and smiling peacefully. He said aloud, "Wow, the hypnotization is working." The man told me if I hallucinate him later, it means it worked. I couldn't believe it, and lunged for my phone on the coffee table. But the man grabbed it and pulled a gun from his waistband. One wrong move, and I shoot. Sit down. I sat frozen, with my hands shaking in my lap. I looked at my dad, and he just smiled at me, like everything was fine. The shouting is very vivid. He warned me about the audio component. I stared in disbelief. My own dad was watching a stranger rob us and smiling about it. The man started unmounting the TV, and I yelled, "Dad, he's taking the TV." Dad just smiled. "There is no TV. There is only peace." The man walked past Dad carrying the TV, and Dad reached out and patted the man's leg. "Goodbye, hallucination." I pinched myself because I was sure I was dreaming, but my face dropped in horror because I wasn't. The man came back with my PlayStation and laptop. He leaned over Dad and slid the wallet out of his jacket pocket, then asked Dad, "How's the hypnotization?" Dad beamed, "Super realistic," and the man laughed. He walked across the room toward the side table where Dad's watch was. I was in shock, and the second his back was turned, I ran to Dad and slapped him hard across the face. "Dad, this is real! We're being robbed!" But Dad smiled wider, his cheek going red. "Wow, the hypnotization is so cool. I can even feel pain as if someone actually slapped me." "Dad, he has a gun," I said, almost crying. Dad looked right at the man's gun, bliss on his face. He warned me the trance might include weapons. They aren't real either. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it. The man took the watch and zipped his loaded duffel bag. He walked past me, tipped his hat while laughing, and walked out the front door. I sat there shaking, looking at half of our house cleared out. Everything was silent except for Dad humming on the couch, smiling at nothing. 4 hours later, the timer beeped. Dad blinked and stretched his arms. "Wow, that was vivid," he laughed. "I even saw him take our TV. The mind is amazing." He sat up and looked at the wall where our TV used to be. His smile faded. "Son, where's our TV?" My dad would pat my shoulder and say, "This is the year, kid. I can feel it. Every Knicks playoffs for 25 years, and he died the summer before they finally made the finals. Now, it was the Knicks' first finals since 1999. So for the last game, I laced up my Timbs, pulled on my dad's old Ewing jersey, and flipped my Yankees hat backwards. Timbs in June and all. I got my son in his little Brunson jersey, lifted him onto my shoulders, and told him the same thing. He was wrong every time, all the way back to watching these same Spurs beat them in 5 games from his knee, but he never stopped believing. And this year was different, because we had Jalen Brunson, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Cat Daddy, and the heart of the garden, Josh Hart. If you believed in miracles, you had to believe in these Knicks. So we shoved into Times Square with 50,000 other believers. My son gripped my shoulders every time the square went quiet. "Dad, are we gonna lose?" he asked, and I told him to watch. Brunson was hooping on the big screens, his name bouncing off the buildings, and my dad would have loved this kid. But the Spurs kept punching back, and the square turned desperate, strangers grabbing strangers, an old man praying into his hands. I gripped my son's ankles tighter with every swing, because if they lost, his first Knicks memory would be the same as mine. My heart was slamming in my throat, and I swear I heard my dad in the noise, saying it one more time. "This is the year, kid." The clock ran out, and I stopped breathing. The Knicks won it all. The square detonated, grown men crying, strangers screaming with joy, like the city had held its breath for 50 years and let it out. My son screamed above me, while I pressed my dad's jersey to my face and cried for the first time since his funeral. 25 years of believing, and the first time I said it for him, it came true. "You were right, Dad. This was the year." My friend Jeremiah looked into a kid's eyes in the hallway, and the kid instantly dropped to the floor. Jeremiah yelled, "I told you all I have magic powers. Who else wants to try?" None of us believed him, until Jeremiah pointed at another random kid. "You look at me." The kid turned around and looked into Jeremiah's multicolored eyes, then immediately slumped to the floor. Everyone looked at each other in disbelief, and a crowd immediately formed around Jeremiah. Every kid he made eye contact with fell to the floor, and only got up when he snapped his fingers. Word spread through the school immediately, but then during math class, Mr. Stevenson slammed his hands on the table. "Jeremiah, stop Stop whatever stupid game you're playing. You're not a wizard, and you're distracting the other students. Jeremiah looked up from his desk and deep into Mr. Stevenson's eyes. Mr. Stevenson's own eyes suddenly rolled back, and he collapsed on the floor, knocking his cup of coffee onto his shirt. My jaw dropped, and we all pulled our phones out recording Jeremiah because a real superhuman was in our class. Jeremiah just chuckled, and when I asked him how he does it, he smirked. I'm not from here. Our videos spread around our small town, and a newspaper even published an article, Local Boy with Mysterious Powers. That's when Jeremiah announced a live show where he would make people collapse live if they doubted him. On the day, everyone gathered in the school auditorium, whispering and excited. Cameras and press were there. But when 4 p.m. hit, Jeremiah wasn't there. We waited a full hour, but Jeremiah never showed. One by one, everyone left, and the next day, Jeremiah wasn't in school. His mom answered the door and said Jeremiah hadn't been home since the night before. I sent him messages, but he never replied. He was just gone. Then 4 years later, I ran into him at a coffee shop. Jeremiah, is that you? He smiled like nothing happened. I asked what happened with the live show and your powers. He laughed so hard he put his coffee down. I never had powers. I gave $1 to every person so they would drop. Even Mr. Stevenson. Once the videos were made, I knew the whole town would pay for tickets, so I took all the ticket money and bounced. I was in disbelief. No way, man. How much did you make? He smirked. $37 profit, dude. I looked into his eyes. He did all that for $37. It was my first day in my new foster.
Alright, well guys, if I like this video, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next one. And also if I want to do more reactions of his story, and just comment, do more reactions, and bye bye everyone.